Well, hello there, studio music teacher friends. Welcome to the Beyond Measure podcast. Christina Whitlock here, your voice of experience and self-appointed anytime piano teacher friend. We are taking a few weeks here on the podcast to examine things that distract us from doing our best work. Last week, we talked about the trappings of business and marketing, and I have another zinger ready for you today. But before we go any further, I just want to give a big, hearty thank you to the members of my Super Friends community on Patreon. They are truly the backbone of this operation. This show does not just happen, but the camaraderie and support that I receive from those super friends is essential to getting my work published every week. I know we all love podcasts because they're free, but this is me encouraging you to find ways to support the free ideas you consume. For me, that's joining the Super Friends community, even just for a month or two, to see what it's all about. Check out the link in today's show notes or head to christinawhitlock.com/support for all the info. All right, friends, let's get on with the show. This is episode 229 of the Beyond Measure podcast. Over the summer, I had the great fortune to attend the National Conference on Keyboard Pedagogy, also known as NCKP. If you're not aware, this year's conference was different than those in the past because it opened with an entire day of roundtable discussions. This was a whole day dedicated to talking shop with other teachers, talking specifically about the future of our profession. And that is totally my element, friends. It was all the things I love to think about in the cracks of my everyday life, but instead of little thoughts here and there, I had an entire day devoted to hashing out my ideas with other teachers. It was pretty much a dream come true. Now, if you were there, you know it was also an exhausting day, but I definitely took away a lot of meaningful thoughts and connections from that time. Something interesting struck me at the very start of that day, and then I kept noticing it throughout the rest of the conference. It seems anytime piano teachers are asked about the biggest pain point in their studio, there is one answer you can count on hearing. Think about it. If you were asked, what is the biggest problem you face as a piano teacher? There is one thing it seems most teachers say. Are you thinking the same thing? It's, my students don't practice enough. And after talking with teacher after teacher that week at NCKP, it became obvious that there is a prevailing belief that if students would just practice more, our teacher worries would be alleviated. Make no mistake about it, I agree. Of course, I would love my students to practice more. Students today are overscheduled and easily distracted, and yes, they would move further and faster if they spent more time at their instruments during the week. But as we continue this series on the podcast, examining the things that distract us from doing our best work, I can't help but think that we get hung up on this practice issue, and it keeps us from digging deeper. To me, the practice problem is sort of the lowest hanging fruit we can pick. It's the easy complaint. It's the most obvious excuse for why our students aren't better musicians. And it might be true. When it comes to slow progress, lack of practice at home very well might be the biggest contributing factor. The problem is, it's easy for us as teachers to stop there, to say, clearly, practice is the problem. Full stop. There's nothing I can do for this kid until they start practicing more, right? Well, the practice problem, becomes a distraction from what we as teachers can do. I am forever reminding you here to keep perspective on the things you have control over and the things you don't. It's important to remember that we cannot control what happens in a student's home outside of their lesson time. We get them for 30, 45, whatever minutes a week, and that's what we have control of. In letting ourselves blame that outside practice time, we let ourselves off the hook for things that we are actually responsible for. You know the classic breakup line of, "It's not you, it's me." Well, blaming practice time is just the opposite. It's not me, it's you. And again, that might be true. Please do not think I'm over here trying to pile more guilt on your plate. We do enough of that to ourselves. I also just don't want us to throw our hands up in the air and spend the rest of our careers miserable because our students aren't practicing and we don't think there's anything else we can do about it. So, friends, today I am suggesting, in love, that we stop being so quick to dismiss our role in student progress. I don't want lack of practice to distract us from the things we can do during the lesson. So, of course, we will continue to encourage practice at home. That means setting expectations and communicating them frequently. It means making sure our students know what practice actually looks like. It means providing them with achievable goals and making sure that they leave their lessons feeling capable and accountable. Those are all things that fall on us and directly set our students up for success. But let's also talk about what we can do beyond those things. I know I've talked about practice several times already on this podcast. Fun fact, 2 of those episodes consistently rank in my top 5 downloads of all time. I will go ahead and link those in the show notes for today's episode because even though they're a few years old at this point, I still think they're pretty solid listens, or even worth a re-listen. Episode 51 is my practice manifesto. It's currently the 3rd most downloaded episode of Beyond Measure. And in that episode, I challenge this contradiction that I see in our profession. We are often the first people to claim music study is good for everyone, yet we also only want to cater to students who have the right support systems in place to make practice a consistent part of their week. That, to me, is a real conflict. I struggle with this idea that piano study only benefits those with a very specific kind of practice routine when I know what I know about the benefits of studying music. Likewise, episode 52, which is currently the 5th most downloaded episode, is titled Navigating a Lesson When Your Student Hasn't Practiced. It takes a more detailed look on how we can structure our lessons so they're not entirely dependent on what our students did at home that week. And therein, friends, lies the crux of the whole thing. A lot of us operate our studios on this mutual expectation that if a student does their work at home, we will do our part during the lesson. And when they're not holding up their end of the bargain, we can't hold up ours, right? Whether you're willing to admit it or not, that's the dynamic of a lot of studios. We can't do our work unless students practice, or bring their books, or learn their flashcards, or whatever. A lot of us do put qualifiers on this teacher-student relationship, spoken or otherwise. That sounds fine on the surface. It makes sense. After all, I'm the one that's all about symbiotic studio relationships, right? We are good for our students, and they are good for us. Both things are true, and both things should be acknowledged. Well, the symbiotic dynamic works in terms of mutual respect and admiration. I'm all for it. I love my students, and they love me, and ideally, there is a clear and obvious balance there. At the same time, the actual leadership of the lesson is up to you. So I don't think this "I'll do my job as long as you do X, Y, or Z" thing is actually the way it works. Here's what I really think. I think our job is easiest when students practice. I think our job is most obvious when students practice. Students who complete their practice assignments fit nicely into our plans. They are following the ideal path. These students allow us to teach what we know in the beautiful sequence we learned it in. In short, it keeps us in our comfort zone. If a student comes to their lesson ready to pass their piece or start the next section, our steps are simple. We can continue to do our most obvious work. The thing nobody says out loud is this: when a student doesn't complete their practice assignments, we have more decisions to make. It's additional mental labor for us. We all know there are so many decisions to make as a piano teacher. We are choosing what repertoire to play, what kind and how much, and how far they're working this week. We are constantly deciding how far to push and when to back off. We have to decide what matters in this moment and what we can circle back to later, what concepts to introduce and when. The decisions are never ending. This is the unnamed work of teaching. It's a lot. So, when we have to add more layers to the situation, like what words do I need to repeat from last week? Or what has my student retained? What do I need to communicate in a different way? What is my student trying to tell me through their body language? Or are my expectations reasonable? Like all of those thoughts, plus your very reasonable human reactions to, I'm so tired of saying the same thing over and over again, or, oh, I'm so annoyed. Why isn't this person following directions? It's a lot, friends. And it's important we name these things so we can deal with them instead of letting it fester in the backs of our minds. So, here's the change-up I suggest. Instead of this approach of, I'll do my part as long as you do yours, I recommend getting crystal clear on your goals for each student. I am big on naming objectives. You probably already know that by now. But our primary goals for our students shouldn't be things like to pass level 2B. It could be, but what does level 2B even mean? What skills are required of them in level 2B? And how can you assess whether they are confident with those skills or not? Because I hate to break it to you, but playing 2 to 3 pieces in their method book using a particular concept does not mean they fully grasp the concept. The idea of, quote, passing pieces is a modern day construct that, if we're not careful, gives all parties involved a false impression of understanding. I'm not against passing pieces. I just don't allow that to determine mastery of a concept. Okay, I have this one student in particular. He's a high school boy, enough said, right? He is a brilliant musician. He listens to every kind of music imaginable. I actually really admire his knowledge of what's out there because he's introduced me to some really cool recordings. He's got this incredible ear, and he has a very unique brain. He also doesn't finish a lot of pieces. I've ripped my hair out over this many times over our 9 years together. There's just something within his quirky brain that once he gets something, once he understands it, it's very hard for him to keep working at it. He needs to jump to the next thing. There are exceptions, of course, but I used to get really tripped up on the fact that we couldn't say he mastered 30 pieces this semester or whatever. Likewise, his parents would be concerned. Like, shouldn't he be able to play every piece in his literature book straight through? Especially since we all know how off the charts brilliant this guy is. It's really been a great case study for me to know what it means to teach the piano rather than teaching repertoire. The truth is, he can play the piano very well. He understands theoretical concepts and he can put them into action. I mean, that's a big deal. If he's interested enough in something, sure, he'll play the whole thing. But I'm here to tell you, if I would have dug my heels in, as I've done with plenty of students, and I would have said, we're not doing anything else until you learn this piece from start to finish, I would have lost him years ago, and he would not have the skill sets he has today. It is much more important to make sure our students are armed with working understandings of concepts so they can apply those skills to the things that interest them. And yes, one of the primary ways we develop those skills is through repertoire. Repertoire that they then take home and practice and improve upon so they can bring it back to you to assess their efforts. That's part of the whole picture here. But we have to keep our eye on the things that really matter. No distractions. So, let's say you're working a student through level 2B in Faber's Piano Adventures. Can you name the primary goals of that level? If you're working students through it, you should be able to. But for now, let me help you out. The Piano Adventures website says Level 2B presents 1-octave scales in the keys of C, G, and F major. Crossing the thumb under allows quick travel up and down the keys. 1, 4, 5, 7 chords offer new opportunities to transpose, harmonize, and compose. Artistry is enhanced with connected pedaling, and students play timeless themes of Bach, Beethoven, Dvorak, as well as spirituals and jazzy pieces. So, okay, the primary takeaways of Level 2B center on playing in the keys of C, G, and F major, including scales and primary chords, as well as transposition and advancing pedal skills. Okay, so if your student comes to their lesson and they can't fluidly make it through Beach Party and Riding the Wind, there are plenty of other things you can do besides repeating everything from last week's lesson. There are 8 million ways we can drill primary chords, and we can check in on scale fingerings and run pedal drills. We can do all of that without even touching those 2 pieces and allow them to go home and continue practicing them this week. Here's the big takeaway, friends. When repertoire is stuck because of lack of practice, I spend the lesson time hunkering down on concepts because that's really what we're trying to teach, right? We teach concepts through repertoire, but repertoire is not the only way to teach concepts. And I can only drill concepts because I have defined the objectives my students should be working on. I have a plan for what I want them to learn. It's also worth noting your method series of choice does not solely need to dictate your student objectives. Far from it. But they should be part of the way you're supporting the objectives. Otherwise, why would you be using them, right? Remember, you know all kinds of things your students don't know about playing your instrument. The success of their lesson is not determined by what they do at home. I promise that you can show them something new or introduce them to something they've never experienced before, and doing so will render the lesson a success. I'm not saying that you should stop expecting students to practice. Absolutely not. But I am hoping you will realize that sometimes we default to lackluster teaching because we are presented with circumstances that require us to dig a little deeper. It's also worth noting, the larger your studio is, the more challenging this is to do, because your mental resources are stretched so thin. This is reason 712 I am not a fan of teaching a giant student load anymore. Teaching enormous rosters of students just makes it harder for you to plan personalized objectives and concept goals. It makes it easier to fall into default lesson plans and that you do your job and I'll do mine perspective. Each student comes with their own amount of emotional labor. And when we get tapped out, we default to the easiest excuses, like, my students don't practice enough. Whew, okay, have I given you a lot to think about today? I hope so. Next week, we will continue our look at things that distract us from doing our best work. Just like last week's chat about business and marketing, today's thoughts on practice are designed to help you keep these things in a healthy, balanced perspective. Again, of course, business and marketing practices matter for our studio work. And yes, practice expectations matter too. I simply want to shine a spotlight on the fact that we let these things take up more space in our brains than they deserve. And I want to help you find a better way, better for you and better for the students that you are serving. So, on that note, let's grab our nearest glass and wrap up with a toast. Studio music teacher friends from all around the world, today we release a collective sigh over our frustrations with lack of practice. We acknowledge the multiple challenges this brings to our teacher lives, and we take comfort in knowing there are teachers all over the world wringing their hands alongside us. Even still, let's vow to move forward with renewed commitment to setting more objectives and being creative in the ways we drill concepts outside of repertoire. After all, we're teaching more than repertoire here. Our work is important on many levels, and we cannot afford to get distracted by things that are outside our control. My glass is raised to you, friends. Hear, hear. Thanks for hanging with me while I tackle a big topic here today, friends. I always end these episodes thinking, but I have so much more to say. If you want to be part of ongoing conversations like this one, members of my Super Friends community have the opportunity to gather and learn together every month. Our next session is coming up on Friday, August 29th. We'll be answering each other's questions and examining pedagogical opportunities and strategies in Chihuahuan's collection, Circus Sonatinas. If you love learning about new repertoire, talking shop with other teachers, or hearing deeper dives than you get in 20 weekly minutes with me here, I hope you'll consider joining the Super Friends community on Patreon. Membership is currently just $6 a month, which is kind of ridiculous, honestly, but but I'm leaving it that low as long as I can afford to in hopes of serving more of you. The more people who join, the longer that price point will hold. So it's just one more reason that we are better together, friends. All right, I'll be back in your ears next week. In the meantime, take great care of yourself. Onward and upward we go.